Good evening, Brennan, and welcome along to the Lodge Hope of Karachi, number 337, and our lockdown lecture series. Brennan, I can't believe we've hit the half century. This is our 50th meeting. I remember when we hit double figures, we thought this will only go on for another couple of weeks. But I think now there is actually some light at the end of the tunnel. But until then, you're all more than welcome to be here every Tuesday night, and we will have a quality Masonic speaker to help you with your daily advancement. As ever, Bern, can I remind you to please follow the Grand Lodge of Scotland guidance. Please keep your video camera running so I can see who's there and a recognisable name within the screen. If you do have to put it off for bandwidth issues, just drop me a little message in the chat, please, Bern. Please can I also ask you to sign the virtual tile so we've got a record of all our members and visitors who attend our virtual meetings. That would be very much appreciated. Bren, this evening, for many of you, if not all of us, I'm going to maybe take you back to when you were a school kid and you got your first Stanley Gibbons album, and you were, that was one of your first proper hobbies, collecting stamps. I must admit, I did have a collection. It's up the garret someplace just now, and it's probably worth a fortune. Not. I had 5 of those penny black things that my dad said were going to be very rare, but I think they were just a copy, no doubt. My dad just trying to keep me happy. But Brian, I'm sure we've all participated in stamp collecting or philately at some point in the past. This evening, I'm delighted to have Brother Campbell Caraher along from the Masonic Philatelic Club, easy for me to say, who's going to give us a run-through of Freemasonry and its connections with Philately. So, Brother Campbell, over to you, sir, and we look forward to hearing you this evening.
Thank you very much, Gordon. I trust you can all hear me, and I trust you're all keeping well in these strange times. Anyway, I'll give you a bit of a brief background to myself. I'm a Middlesex Freemason. I've only been collecting stamps possibly for 10 years or so. I've got 2 teenage children, and they started collecting stamps, and I came across a Masonic stamp, and that's what got me into it. And then I'd say about eight years ago, the lodge that my mother lodged, they were struggling for a ceremony, and we're looking for an oration, and I said, I'll do a little talk on the Masonic stamps, and it grew from there. So I now give talks to London and Middlesex lodges, usually in person. So this is the first time I've done it on over the internet on Zoom. So I hope it goes well. I have a PowerPoint presentation which has photographs and information on the slides. So in a second, I'll bring that up and I'll start going through them and talk over the. Hopefully, you'll be able to hear me over the microphone. So if you can keep all your questions to the end, I'd be very grateful. So it doesn't stop me in mid-flow. And I do feel quite honoured that I'm the 50th fellow doing a talk for you. I'm not entirely sure about the quality, so I hope you enjoy it. So. I need to share my screen now.
Yeah, you should be able to do that, Campbell.
Which
and that's come up. Yeah.
So hopefully you should. Have you just got one?
No, I've got your full screen. If you click on slideshow from beginning, we should go to the full. That's it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. Right then. Okay, brethren. I'm not sure if there's any distinguished brethren in there as well, but this following presentation is my summary of the relationship between stamp collecting and the craft. Now, I thought it best to start at the beginning and provide you with a brief background into the history of stamps and the collecting of them, in an attempt to put this hobby into some form of perspective, and to provide you with a summary of its history from the issuing of the very first postal stamp up until the present day, detailing all the numerous links with Freemasonry as I go. Now, it was almost, or just over 180 years ago, in May 1840, which saw the introduction of the world's first postage stamp, the penny black. It was issued by Great Britain and bore the image of a young Queen Victoria, the reigning monarch of the day. And it is here that the connection with Freemasonry begins, as the penny black was printed by an engraver called Jacob Perkins, who was an American Freemason. Now, Brother Perkins was a member of St. Peter's Lodge, Newburyport, Massachusetts, and amongst his other achievements, he was a prolific inventor of the day. Now, the first stamp was produced without perforations and had to be cut from the sheet with scissors in order for it to be used. And it took 14 years before a workable solution would be introduced and employed in both Great Britain and the United States. Now, you mentioned you might have a few penny blacks in your garage. Now, almost 89 million of these penny black stamps were issued at the time, with many still in circulation today, almost 200 years later. Now, the letters in the corners of the stamp apply to the sheet and plate numbers, when and where they were printed, and can cost nowadays between typically £350 for a penny black in good condition, up to £3.5 million. Now, the last time I was in London and I was outside Stanley Gibbons, there was a penny black stamp from a particular position on a sheet, and it was £350. Next to it was the same stamp from the same place on the plate, but it was linked to another 5 stamp, and that was £650,000. So any anomalies you get with stamps, their value goes through the roof. Any faults, anything wrong with them? Now, there's been numerous stamps bearing Queen Victoria's image, including these two celebrating her 63rd or 63-year reign and 100 years from her Diamond Jubilee in 1997. Now, the penny black formed part of the new postal rate system, which was brought about following the publication of Sir Rowland Hill's booklet, Post Office Reform, and replaced the previous system, which had proved unsatisfactory. Now, the fact that he was buried in Westminster Abbey in 1879 shows the importance of his work at the time. And although Sir Rowland was a member of the Royal Society and both a great Victorian social reformer and inventor, it doesn't appear that he was a Freemason. Now, Sir Rowland's new system was much more efficient than the previous one, which relied upon the recipient paying for letters on delivery. So if the letter was not wanted or couldn't be paid for, the post office would foot the bill, which at the time was costing the British taxpayer somewhere in the region of £5 million, or almost £400 million in today's money. So as you can appreciate, something had to be done. And the new scheme was also much simpler, as the old scheme was chargeable for every mile the letter had travelled on its journey before being delivered. Now, it is unclear where or when stamp collecting first started, but we do know that by 1860, there were thousands of collectors throughout Europe. There was also a growing number of people selling stamps to collectors, and in 1856, Stanley Gibbons Limited was founded in London, selling stamps and stamp collection supplies, a business still in existence today with their world-famous shop on the Strand in London. And there's a modern version of it. Now, in the 1870s, books started to be published on stamps and their significance, and this increased the knowledge of stamps as well as interest to a wider audience. Now, a French stamp collector combined the Greek words philos, meaning friend or amateur, and atelia, meaning free or exempt from a charge or tax, and came up with the word philately. In his own words, philately therefore signifies the love of the study of everything relating to franking. Now, I've given this talk to a Greek lodge, and they agreed with me that's exactly what that word meant. Now, organised philately started in 1869 in London with the creation of the Philatelic Society. In 1906, this society was granted royal patronage and has since been known as the Royal Philatelic Society, London. And in 1925, the British Philatelic Association was founded for the protection and help of everyone interested in stamp collecting. Now, across the pond, the United States issued its first postage stamps in 1847. The first issue honoured Benjamin Franklin, who, amongst other things, was an inventor, printer, editor, politician, founder of schools, government ambassador, and the first Postmaster General of the United States. And the second stamp honoured George Washington, the first President of the United States. I'm sure you know Benjamin Franklin and George Washington were both notable Freemasons. Now, Benjamin Franklin was initiated into Freemasonry into St. John's Lodge in 1731, Philadelphia, under the jurisdiction of Massachusetts, and remarkably became its Grand Master 3 years later in 1734. Now, he was born on the January the 7th, 1706, in Boston, Massachusetts. He was one of the founding fathers of the United States, a renowned polymath, that's to say a person whose expertise spans a significant number of different subject areas. He was also an author, civil activist, statesman, diplomat, and successful newspaper editor. Franklin earned the title The First American. He also printed the first Masonic book in America, and in 1784, his lodge laid the cornerstone of Independence Hall some 3 years after the British surrender at Yorktown. Now, George Washington was initiated into Freemasonry on the 4th of November, 1752, in Fredericksburg, Lodge number 4, Virginia. He took his oath of inauguration as the first president of the United States on the 30th of April, 1789, on a Bible borrowed from St. John's Lodge of New York, and a Bible which has been used for the inauguration of Presidents Warren G. Harding in 1921, Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1951, James Carter in 1977, and most recently in 1989 by George Bush Sr. It wasn't used by the recent inauguration of the president, but the First Lady Vice President, she did put her hand on that Bible. Now, we'll meet George Washington and Warren G. Harding again later on in this presentation. Now, the beginning of the 20th century saw continued growth for stamp collecting. In 1910, when King George V took the throne of Great Britain, no one could have foreseen the tremendously positive effect he would have had on the hobby. He had taken an interest in stamp collecting at an early age. It is apparent that as early as 1890, he had a substantial collection in which he had a very keen interest. Needless to say, as the Prince of Wales, he had an excellent access to stamps and all their inventory, especially if it related to Great Britain and any of its colonies. Now, after he became king, he arranged to have all his country's stamps reviewed by the Crown prior to printing. Now, King George V adhered to the state tradition of not accepting philatelic material from individuals not well known to him. So in some instances, when a philatelic gift was presented to him, the king would request the keeper of the royal collection to find a duplicate of equal value from the royal collection and offer it in exchange. Now, during his reign, the king firmly established the royal collection. This collection was mounted in red albums with the words stamps in gold on the album spines and were unique to King George V. Now, when knowledge that King George V was an avid stamp collector began to be known, it was a tremendous boost for philately. Added to this, the knowledge that in 1932, the man running for the presidency of the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt, was also an avid stamp collector, a notable Freemason. Philately took on a new respectability. Then we could do with a microphone being muted there. Now, Brother Roosevelt was initiated on the 10th of October, passed on the 14th of November, and raised on the 28th of November, all in 1911, in Holland Lodge, number 8, New York. Now, both these men made a very positive impact on stamp collecting during the 1930s and 40s. Subsequently, King George VI, who before ascending to the throne of England after his brother's abdication, continued his father's passion for stamp collecting. Albert, Duke of York, as he was known before becoming our monarch, was initiated into Freemasonry on the 2nd of December 1919, Navy Lodge 2612, and was installed as its master in 1921. King George VI was the Grand Master of Middlesex between 1924 and 1937. He had albums acquired during his reign in blue, and Queen Elizabeth II has green albums in the same design as her father and grandfather. Now, nowadays, there are hundreds of specialty organisations for niche collectors, including society that specialise in collecting stamps specifically relating to all things Masonic, with the most recent British club being formed in 1977 with the sole objective of the furtherance of Masonic research via the media of postage stamps, the dissemination of knowledge gained, and the quiet enjoyment of this interesting hobby. So at this point, I should like to thank the Masonic Philatelic Club for providing me with the source material, which I'm now sharing with you, and for asking me to assist you with this talk. Anyway, I digress. Now, Masonically themed stamps can be categorized into 6 classifications. Class 1 stamps are official or pure Masonic stamps, which are created specifically to honour Freemasonry. And I'll show you some of those there. Now, Class 2 stamps depict famous Freemasons from Buzz Aldrin and John Glenn to Winston Churchill and Tommy Cooper. And as you can see on the slide, Donald Duck was a Freemason as well. Class 3 stamp, oh, no, some more Class 2 Freemasons there, apologies. Oh, Sissy was a Freemason as well. And I'm guessing you'll recognise that fella. Now, Class 3 stamps depict monuments, buildings or structures which were built or places discovered or named by men who were Freemasons. As you can tell, there are lots of Masonic stamps from all different countries. Class 4 stamps commemorate events involving Freemasons or Masonic events, like the World Fair in 1964 there. Now, Class 5 stamps were either designed or depict the work of a particular Freemason, including Joseph Mitchell, the designer of the Spitfire, Winston Churchill, and Henry Ford. As you can see, this stamp here from John Mitchell, you can see his face behind the Spitfire in the clouds if you look closely. This is John Mitchell being signed in a lodge meeting, just to prove that he was a Freemason. There's quite a few stamps about Winston Churchill, although he was only in the craft for a very short period. I'll see Henry Ford. And a few famous Canadian Freemasons here. There's quite a lot of revolutionaries as well that are for famous Freemasons. Now, Class 6 stamps show Masonic symbols. So on the left and right-hand side there, you've got the most recent Isle of Man stamps celebrating the tercentenary of the United Grand Lodge of England. And there's one for anyone in RAM. Now, oddly enough, and apart from some 19th century stamps depicting famous Freemasons of the day, the first stamps which depicted Freemasonry in earnest were produced in Serbia during the Second World War, and apart from their postal use, were issued to raise funds and spread hatred against Freemasonry. Now, you can see that the stamps had a surtax on them, which was used to pay for anti-Masonic, anti-communist, and anti-Jewish propaganda. On January the 1st, 1942, Serbia issued these 4 stamps to commemorate the Grand Anti-Masonic Exhibition, which opened in Belgrade on the October 22nd, 1941. These stamps depict a strong and victorious Serbia crushing an evil Masonic, communist, Jewish plot for world domination. Now, each stamp bore the opening date 22/1941 and was labelled Anti-Masonic Exhibition in Serbia in Cyrillic letters, that's to say an ancient alphabet known to the region. Now, these stamps, with their association of Masonic, communist, Jewish and Serbian symbols, provide a remarkable window into how Freemasonry was regarded by the Serbian government during this wartime period. Now, even after the communist takeover of Yugoslavia in May 1945, Masons were regarded with suspicion and contempt by the Serbian-dominated Yugoslav authorities, and Masonry remained outlawed for the next 45 years until the summer of 1990. Now, this stamp here shows Masonry elegantly clad as a hooded figure wearing an apron and Star of David upon its bosom. This hooded figure is shown cringing from a strong ray of light, which emanates from a circular palabastic design, apparently representing the forces of anti-Freemasonry. The second stamp in the series shows a hand emanating from a silvery light, as in the first stamp, and grasping the neck of a huge viper whose head rests on a square and compass. This viper or snake is covered with the Star of David rather than scales. Now, biblically, the snake represents the forces of evil, Jews and Masons in this instance, and here is symbolically being stopped by the hand of Nazism, however ironic that is. Now, the red stamp in the series shows a sheaf of wheat superimposed on a cross, which is a pointed lower leg, together with a hammer and sickle, all resting upon and splitting a star that symbolizes Serbia. This attempts to show that the Jew, Mason, and Communist are all alike in ideal, if not one in the same. And the last stamp in the series shows a Star of David upon the curved surface of the earth between two pillars which are being put asunder by a zealous modern-day Serbian Samson. These pillars presumably refer to the two pillars at the entrance of King Solomon's Temple. Now then, so as not to depress you, a little over a year after the end of World War II, on the 14th of September 1946, an anti-fascist exhibition was held in Vienna with the purpose of informing the Austrian public of the crimes committed by the Nazi regime. Now, over 840,000 visitors attended. Now, this exhibition was titled Niemals Vergessen, which means never forget, and was attended by the Austrian Federal Chancellor and a number of senior Soviet occupying soldiers. The exhibition paid particular attention to those Nazi leaders who led the war. Now, to commemorate this post-war exhibition, Austria issued a set of 8 stamps on the 16th of September 1946. Now, surtaxes on these stamps during the period were typically used to raise revenue for public charities and celebrations, reconstruction projects, and national causes. However, the surtaxes on this anti-fascist stamps were also used to fund this anti-fascist exhibition. Now, this set of Austrian stamps was designed directly to oppose the 1942 Serbian anti-Masonic stamp set. So the red stamp, hold on a minute. Bear with me, I do apologise. I've got my slides mixed up. So the red stamp shows a hand saluting and making the oath of allegiance to the Austrian flag in front of an Austrian mountainous landscape scene and broken free from Nazi bondage. Now, the 0202 stamp details a German imperial eagle with an Austrian flag above a burning and inflamed swastika. The black 0503 stamp shows a Nazi sword with a swastika hilt piercing on an outline map of Austria, symbolising the destruction caused from the German invasion of 1938. The 0604 stamp has a broom sweeping a broken fash and swastika off of a map of Europe and into the sea, symbolising the Allied victory over German-occupied Europe. And the orange 0806 stamp shows St. Stephen's Cathedral in flames, surrounded by an illuminated crown of thorns, following an accidental Allied bombing raid on the Austrian capital of Vienna in April 1945. We accidentally dropped 8,000 bombs on it. Now, do apologise. This stamp shows a pleading skeletal hand behind a barbed wire fence, an Austrian flag and the letters KZ, which refer to the Mauthausen camp located in the north of Austria and its 100 subcamps, which were spread over the rest of the country. Now, Mauthausen was one of the largest concentration camp complexes in Germany, or German-occupied Europe. This camp was operated by the SS when Austria was annexed into the German Third Reich on the 12th of March 1938, until its liberation by Allied troops on the 5th of May 1945. Now, this camp, which included quarries, munitions and arms factories, mine and assembly plant, was nicknamed the Bone Grinder, with the infamous steps of death that you can see on the right, where prisoners were forced to carry 50 kg granite slabs on their backs up the 186 steps to the top of the quarry, and was classed as a grade 3 camp which meant that it was intended to be a tougher concentration camp, if such a thing is possible, for the incorrigible political enemies of the Third Reich, and was used for extermination through labour, where it is estimated that between 122,766 and 322,000 Soviet, Spanish, and Polish prisoners perished. Right, these two stamps here, were actually the stamps that the Austrian government wanted to produce, but they were deemed to be too inflammatory at the end of the war, so they weren't used. And these are quite valuable and quite rare, these two stamps. The one on the right shows Hitler's death mask, and the one on the left is again, it's the SS lightning bolts destroying a map of Austria. Now, on a more positive note, you'll be glad to hear, I'd now like to make reference to two American presidents who I mentioned earlier, namely George Washington and the lesser-known Warren G. Harding. Both these Freemasons are part of a select group of Freemasons who became president of the United States of America. Now, it's noteworthy that over a third of all the 44 American presidents, or 15 to be precise, have been Freemasons, from George Washington back in 1789 to Gerald Ford, who left office in 1977. It's also noteworthy that for over the past 40 years, no American president has been a Freemason, which is also the longest period of the 267 years of the American presidency without a Freemason as president. Now, as you might expect, each one of these remarkable men had stamps produced for them and in their honour. So categorised as Class 2 stamps, as they depict famous Freemasons, they make a valued addition to any collection. Unfortunately for collectors, many of these stamps are available in their thousands. Now, I should clarify the criteria I've applied to naming these famous American presidential Freemasons, as there are some anomalies and quirks which could muddy the waters. Firstly, these men have had to have been past presidents of the United States of America, which is quite obvious, you might think. However, Brother David Rice Atkinson, who was a member of Platt Lodge number 56 in Missouri, was only the president of the United States of America for one day, on the 4th of March, 1849. As the president-elect, Zachary Taylor, and his vice president, being devout Christians, refused to attend their swearing-in on the Sabbath, and as the previous presidential term had expired the previous day, it left the presidency vacant. Now, Atkinson was sworn in as president by Judge Magnum, but as his presidency only lasted for one day, I have not included him within the aforementioned list, although he does deserve a mention. Now, secondly, I have selected presidents who completed their Masonic initiation, as some of them did not progress to being passed or raised. Abraham Lincoln now also deserves a mention, because although he was not a Freemason, he did apply to join Tyrell Lodge in Springfield, Illinois. However, after his nomination for the presidency in 1860, he withdrew his Masonic application in case it would be misconstrued to achieve him political favour in the run-up to the election. He told the lodge that he would reapply for membership once he had retired from the presidency, but alas, as he was assassinated during his term, this was not to be. So, following Lincoln's death, Tyrone Lodge adopted the following resolution: that the decision of President Lincoln to postpone his application for the honours of Freemasonry, lest his motives be misconstrued, is the highest degree honourable in his memory. Now, here's a few of the stamps for these presidents. James Monroe was initiated as an entered apprentice in Williamsburg Lodge number 6, and records show him attending a reception in his honour as a Master Mason in 1776. Andrew Jackson became a Master Mason in 1800. He was a very active Freemasonry, and he served as the Grand Master of Tennessee from 1822 to 1823. James K. Polk became an entered apprentice, fellow craft and Master Mason in 1820. exalted a Royal Archmason in 1825. He assisted in the laying of the Smithsonian Institution, Washington, D.C. on May the 1st, 1847. James Buchanan was initiated as an entered apprentice on the 11th of December, 1816, and became Worshipful Master of Lancaster Lodge number 43 in 1825. He was later exalted in Royal Arch Chapter number 43, going on to become Deputy Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of these presidents, the stamps that were produced for them, the value, the 15 cents, matches that he was the 15th president of the United States. That's a little quirky thing I've noticed. Now, Andrew Johnson, 17th president, 17 cents, joined the fraternity at the conclusion of his senatorial term in the House of Representatives and became a Master Mason in 1851 at Greenville Lodge 119 in Tennessee. He received the Scottish Rite degree in the White House in 1867. James A. Garfield was initiated as an entered apprentice in Magnolia Lodge number 20, Columbus, Ohio, passed as a fellow craft and raised as a Master Mason in 1864. He was exalted in Columbus Royal Arch Chapter and Knight Templar, both in 1866. Now, sadly, James Garfield was assassinated 4 months into his term of office as president. William McKinley was made a Master Mason in 1865. He was affiliated with Kenton Lodge number 60 in Ohio in 1867 and became a charter member of Eagle Lodge number 43. He received the Capilla degree in Kenton in 1883 and was made a Knight Templar in 1884. Theodore Roosevelt became a Master Mason in Matlock Lodge number 806, Oyster Bay, New York in 1901. Now, records show that he was a frequent visitor to many other lodges. William Taft was made a Mason at site with the body of Kilwinnie Lodge number 356, Cincinnati, Ohio, by the then Grand Master Charles S. Hodgkinson. His father and 2 brothers were also members of this lodge. Warren G. Harding was initiated in Marion Lodge number 70 in Marion, Ohio, on the 28th of June 1901. He received no other degree until after becoming US President. A member of the Royal Arch Chapter and Knights Templar in 1921, along with Scottish Rite and Shrine also in 1921. Franklin D. Roosevelt, he was initiated as an entered apprentice in Holland Lodge number 8, New York, on the 11th of October 1911. Now, President Roosevelt was made the first honorary Grand Master of the Order of the Malay on the 13th of April 1934 at the White House. Oh, apologies. Brother Truman served as the first Worshipful Master of Grand View Lodge number 618. He was made a Sovereign Grand Inspector General, 33 degree. He also was the only Freemason to have been awarded a 50-year certificate and the only president to reach his golden anniversary. It's worth mentioning that Harry S. Truman was also a member of the Ku Klux Klan. So I do wonder if he joined Freemasonry to progress his political career, but then he did more than all the other presidents. Now, President Johnson was initiated in 1937 in Johnston Lodge, number 561, Texas. Like President Monroe, he never completed his degree. And the last president, Gerald R. Ford, was initiated on the 30th of September 1949 in Malta Lodge, number 465, Grand Rapids, Michigan. He was raised on the 18th of May 1951. Now, as you can see, there's lots and lots of countries where Masonic stamps are produced. In actual fact, over 100 countries on the, I think currently this is about 206 countries on the planet, and Freemasonry stamps are produced in over half of those countries, although not so many in Great Britain. And in actual fact, there isn't a pure Masonic or Class 1 Masonic stamp produced by Great Britain. It's worth mentioning, by the way, this is the first stamp that got me interested in Masonic stamps. So the nearest we can get to a Masonic stamp from or of Great Britain is this 1946 peace or King George VI victory stamp, which was designed by Mr. Reynolds Stone, a descendant of the painter Sir Joshua Reynolds, following a decision in 1946 to celebrate the ending of World War II and the beginning of a necessary period of reconstruction. 24 million of these 3D victory stamps were issued by the Post Office in 1946 over a period of 2 months. Now, it was one of a number of designs submitted to King George VI, who approved the design from several submitted to him for his commemorative issue. Now, I've already mentioned that King George, or His Majesty King George VI, was a member of Navy Lodge, and in 1936, when he succeeded his brother, was Provincial Grand Master for Middlesex, but he was also Grand Master Mason of Scotland and many other orders. Now, when the stamp was issued, King George VI was not Grand Master, as like his predecessors, he had resigned all Masonic offices of his ascension to the throne. Now, there's quite a few Masonic symbols in this stamp. The letters 3 and 4, or the numbers 3 and 5, the 3 degree, the trowel, the square and compass, the square being the fella in the Philanthropic, which was his favourite degree. The way postage is written, revenues at either end, like the 2 pillars, and with the denominating feature of these 3 penny stamp is the face of King George VI. If the stamp is orientated as a map with north to the top, the king is positioned in the east. In the centre flies a dove carrying an olive branch. From time immemorial, the symbol of peace and a familiar emblem being found on the wands and collars of our deacons. Brotherly love amongst men is symbolised by the square and compasses, the former reminding us to act on the square and the latter to keep in due bounds with all mankind. The compasses are at an angle of 45 degrees, one point above and the other below the square, the position of the fellow craft, and also the king's favourite degree. Now, it should be noted that the older form of square is portrayed, and this type of is seen particularly in connection with the master's jewel, also that of the past master. The 2 arms are of unequal length and represent the Greek letter G, or gamma, denoting God, the grand geometrician of the universe. Now, while the trowel and brickwork are not without significance, both in the operative and speculative sense, now you've got to bear with me here, being an important symbol in both the Scottish and American crafts, emblematically spreading the cement of brotherly love among mankind and signifying the planned rebuilding following the end of the war, especially as this 3D stamp was used only for postage to foreign lands where the full significance of these emblems would be better appreciated. Now, cleverly depicted in the Curlic engraving are the numbers 3 and 5, numbers which are repeated through our rituals and too many to mention here. The other symbols are surrounded or nestled and protected by this emblematic group. Now, I've already alluded to the fact that this stamp is not an official Masonic stamp, and it was issued to commemorate the end of World War II and the then hoped for return to peace and reconstruction to follow. However, it cannot be denied that this stamp clearly details several symbols relating to the Masonic order. Now, ordinarily, I set members a bit of a quiz here to see if you can find Hiram. So would you like to unmute everybody? And you've got to find Hiram in this stamp.
If anybody can do that, if they just unmute themselves. Does anyone have a guess at the answer?
Everyone's still awake?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
See, I know the answer, so Campbell, it's rather unfair.
Right.
So
if you mute everybody, then I'll explain it.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. You're okay to go again.
Okay. I've lost me a bit of paper. Top motion cells. Okay, right, and right, the Hiram. Right, in the top right-hand corner, you've got housing, which is H. Bottom left-hand corner is I for industry. In the middle, you've got King George VI, who's the reigning monarch of the day, which is R. Top left-hand corner is A for agriculture. And in the bottom right-hand corner, M for maritime. Right. Right, a couple of years ago, the Masonic Philatelic Club produced a sheet detailing philatelic links between Freemasonry and the British monarchy. There are numerous princes and dukes who were Freemasons, and not all these kings were, but those who weren't were connected to the craft in some way or another. So Henry VII summoned a lodge of master masons in the Palace of Westminster and levelled the footstone of the chapel of Westminster Abbey on the 24th of June, 1502, St John's Day. He was the first king of the House of Tudor and the last king of England to win the throne on the field of battle. Now, it's recorded that he summoned a lodge of master masons to lay this stone, but I'm quite sure they were operative. So that one is a bit of a stretch, if I'm honest. Now, King James VI, or James I, depending on what side of the border you're from, was the King of Scotland and the first Stuart King of England. He commissioned the King James Bible. It was initiated on the 15th of April, 1601, in Lodge Scone and Perth, Scotland, number 3. George IV, initiated on the 6th of February 1787 in a special meeting at the Lodge Star and Garter, London, by his uncle, the Duke of Cumberland, who was then the Grand Master. He became and served as Grand Master in 1790 for 23 years, and he was Grand Master of Scotland from 1805. William IV, initiated on the 9th of March 1786 in Plymouth Lodge number 86. After ascending to the throne, he became Grand Patron of the Order in 1831. His brother, the Duke of Sussex, was Grand Master of England. Edward VII, initiated in 1868 in Stockholm by King Frederick, Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Sweden, installed as Grand Master of England at a ceremony in the Albert Hall conducted by the Earl of Carnarvon. Now, at his coronation in 1902, he took the title the Protector of the Craft. George V, or George Frederick Ernest Albert of the House of Saxe, Coburg and Gotha, which in 1917 changed its name to the House of Windsor. His father was Edward VII. Now, although he wasn't a Freemason, he became the Grand Patron of 3 Masonic charities of the Grand Lodge of England when he ascended the throne. Edward VIII, initiated on the 2nd of May 1919 by the Duke of Connaught into the Household Brigade Lodge number 2614. He became Grand Master of Ougal in 1936. George VI, initiated in 1919 in Navy Lodge number 2612, and on his ascension to the throne was installed as a past Grand Master of Ougal. He was a provincial Grand Master of Middlesex, and he was also the Grand Master of Grand Lodge of Scotland from November 1936 until his ascension to the throne. Now, to commemorate the 300th anniversary of the formation of the first Grand Lodge of England, the Masonic Philatelic Club released a limited edition commemorative sheet of 10 images of Masonically themed stained glass windows and 10 Royal Mail stamps, which can be seen in the centre of this slide in a second. There you go. The stamps and images of the stained glass windows are formed up by a piece of Masonic art forming the background to the whole sheet. The 2 churches whose windows are featured are the Kingston Parish Church in Jamaica and St Peter's Church in Leicester. The sheet was designed by Ken Elston, chairman of the Masonic Philatelic Club, with the help from his wife and editor, Mo Elston. The images from Jamaica have been the subject of a design created by the artist Susan Shirley on an earlier set of Masonic postage stamps issued by Jamaica and the Cayman Islands in 1992. A total of 500 sheets were printed. The stamps on the left is a Serbian and the one on the right Spanish. Now, ironically, both countries with a strong anti-Masonic history, but here they are celebrating 300 years of the United Grand Lodge of England, and we couldn't get one in Great Britain. Now, 6 stamps marking 300 years of the United of Eagle have been produced and issued to celebrate 300 years and English Freemasonry. Now, Freemasonry being a system of morality, veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols, formed the inspiration for these stamps, which featured the badges of office of the senior officers within the lodge, abstract architectural elements from the lodges of England and the Isle of Man, and discrete symbols celebrating the tercentenary, as well as the 50th year of the office of His Royal Highness the Duke of Kent, Grand Master of Ugal. Now, each stamp details lodges of special interest and features a subtle ribbon with the characters HRH DOK GM50 in the border of the stamp, and the official logo of Ugal Tercentenary, which is invisible to the naked eye and can only be seen under ultraviolet light, in typical Masonic fashion, I should add. Now, the Queen's head and the lettering of the word Isle of Man are printed using gold foil, while the central symbol on each stamp is printed in colour to give the effect of gold. The 20p stamp features the jewel of the steward, the horn of plenty, in the foreground, symbolising abundance, and reminds the stewards that their duty is to see that the brethren are well served at the festive board. The lodge at the head of this stamp is St Trinian's Lodge number 2050, which is based on the Isle of Man. This lodge was selected for inclusion by the former chairman of the Post Office, Alex Dowie, OBE, who helped with the creation of the stamps. The background is a geometric pattern containing rings representing the brightest star in the formation of heaven. It also points out the study of mathematics and geometry, which are encouraged amongst all Freemasons. Now, the GPS reference on the border of this stamp is of Freemasons Hall in Douglas on the Isle of Man. The first class stamp, and I apologise about the quality of that photograph, features the jewel of the inner guard, which is 2 swords in saltire. The lodge at the head of the stamp is Barbican Lodge number 8494, which meets at Great Queen Street and represents London Freemasons. The background design is taken from the ceiling and other adornments in the lodge rooms at Great Queen Street. Influenced by Art Deco, it represents beams of light emanating from a centre. The GPS reference on the border of this stamp, is that of the Grand Temple, Freemasons Hall, Great Queen Street, London. The 50p stamp features the jewel of the junior and senior deacons, which is a dove bearing an olive branch, symbolising a faithful messenger, and dates back to the story of Noah in Genesis. After 40 days and 40 nights, a raven was sent out to check if there was any dry land, and the great flood, it never returned. Next, a dove was dispatched. It returned with an olive branch, a message that the waters were receding. The lodge at the head of this stamp is Dolphin Lodge number 4464, which operates under the Bristol province in the west of England. The background design is taken from the central ceiling boss in the Great Hall or Lodge Room number 1 at Grand Lodge. The central start is surrounded by smaller stars and lights, and the GPS reference is that of Freemasons Hall in Bristol. The £1.30 stamp features the jewel of the junior warden, which is the plum rule, symbolising moral uprightness and integrity. It denotes the connection of heaven and earth and teaches us to walk in a righteous manner and maintain a straight and undeviating line along the path of virtue. The lodge at the head of this stamp is Hampton Lodge number 6483, Aylesbury, being a lodge as far from the sea as any lodge in England. And the background design is inspired by the abstract forms of Art Deco. The pattern on the plum rule has been used to denote the simplicity of actions of a virtuous life. And the GPS reference is that of a Masonic memorial garden at the National Memorial Arboretum, commemorating those brethren who are no longer with us. Not many more stamps to go, you'll be pleased to hear. The £1.74 stamp features the jewel of the senior warden, which is the level, symbolising equality. It was used by ancient civilisations as a symbol of equality and justice. It was given to the magistrates within the guild system. The lodge at the head of the stamp is Antiquity Lodge number 2. In 1761, the lodge, the Goose and Gridiron, became the West India and American Lodge. It became the Lodge of Antiquity in 1770, and the background design was inspired by the windows at Freemasons Hall, with the GPS reference is that of the blue plaque in Paternoster Square, St Paul's Churchyard, which marks the former site of the Goose and Gridiron. And lastly, the £3.40 stamp, with a better, clearer photograph, features the jewel of the Watchful Master, which is the square symbolising morality. It is an angle of 90 degrees and the fourth part of a circle, and is a symbol of a regulated life and actions. It is the Masonic rule for correcting and harmonising conduct on principles of morality and virtue, and as a symbol, it is dedicated to the Master. The lodge named at the head of this stamp is Petts Wood Lodge number 5435 in Bromley, and is mentioned in recognition of the work carried out by Mike Baker, head of comms at London Grand Lodge, who put the original submission document together. The background design is based on the Master's jewel, creating a pattern of overlaid right angles, and the GPS references on this stamp offer the air ambulance landing pads at Carnarvon, Wales, and RAF Benson, Thames Valley in London, which represent the millions of pounds donated to the air ambulance service by Freemasons throughout the United Kingdom. Now, brethren, I hope that you have enjoyed this presentation as much as I had researching, writing, and delivering the piece on the hobby of kings and the king of hobbies. Thank you.
Brother Campbell Caraher, thank you so much on behalf of everyone here at the Lockdown Lecture Series provided by the Lodge Hope of Karachi, number 337. It's been very interesting, and I think it's taken many of our brethren back to their childhoods, seeing some of those stamps that they may have collected in the past. I'm quite sure there are some questions in the chat. I did pick up in the chat that some of our keen historians, or our keen Scottish historians, there's always great debate, and they like to remind brethren of the United Grand Lodge of England of their true Masonic heritage that might possibly not be 300 years ago. And I saw some of them picking up on your Isle of Man stamps there, Campbell, but that's certainly not directed at you in any way, shape or form. So just scrolling past the various good. So Ian McIntosh, one of our historians, the inventor of the postage stamp was James Chalmers in Dundee in 1839, who came up with the idea of a small square of gum paper, prepaid. James Chalmers was a Freemason, member of Lodge St David, number 78 in Dundee. Rowland Hill was a Postmaster General and pinched Chalmers' idea. And
I'd be interested to send me that information.
I'm sure Ian,
every morning I walk past a statue of Sir Rowland Hill with a notebook in his hand. I'll be interested to look into that.
Ian, do you want to come in? You need to unmute.
Yes, I can do that. Yes, we have his gravestone in Dundee House. And we've got the full story here of when he submitted his idea to the post office, and Rowland Hill read it and adopted it. But he took the credit.
That does seem to be the case back then, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'll put you two gents in touch by email afterwards. Thank you.
Please, yes, please. I would say, Gordon, that when I enjoyed the questions and answers at the end. I have learned lots of things from all the different members, and I do update this presentation with that information. So yeah. I will certainly be adding Ian's point of view.
That's great, Campbell. I think the other one, if you ever come back north of Scotland, to North Britain or Scotland or whatever we like to call ourselves up here, always be careful to remember the throne of Ware. It's the throne of Great Britain, not the throne of England, because some of the guys just like to remind our English brethren that the Queen is the Queen of Scots as well. Helga from Norway's put a link in there about some stamps, I would imagine, so we can click on that link later on. I'll put that up in the Facebook pages. Michael Hearn, the Duke, was an affiliate member of Lodge Glams number 99 and Grand Master Mason 36 of the Scottish Craft. He resigned as Grand Master Mason in 36 following his accession to the throne. He was made a past Grand Master of English Craft. Not the Star of David, it's the Seal of Solomon. Another interpretation of that there for you, Campbell. Just a curiosity coming from Willie Bartha, the founder of the National Grand Lodge of Romania in 1880, Constantin Monroe, first GM, was arrested for falsifying stamps, among which the famous bull's head. So again, something there maybe Willie can share with us later on the Facebook pages for you to pick up on. Bob Scott, one of our past provincial Grand Masters, Campbell, tells us that one Grand Master Mason, Marcus Humphrey of Dinnet, is a keen stamp collector. And on his many travels around the world, in whichever country he is in, he takes the opportunity to buy local stamps.
So do I.
Yeah, I think it's deacons' wands. Fairies have wands, deacons have rods. He. And again, that's all in the interpretation of what your past masters tell you when you come into your lodge. Because my father told me it was a wand, but he maybe says I'm a bit of a fairy because I've got a sore foot. So hey ho. I'm going to jump over all the comments about the founding of UGLE, Brian. Great lecture. Gutted have to leave.
I'd welcome them. I would welcome them. You've got to remember, my father's from Greenock. I've got my Christian name is Scottish, so I do. I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I think we're very proud of our heritage up here, Campbell. But, and I think we all suspected that you probably had a jock grandmother with your first name. Ian Walk asks, are there not stamps commemorating the moon landings which could be said to have a Masonic connection?
Right. Yes, there are. Actually, a strange one is to be on an American stamp, you must be dead. But there are two instances when that actually isn't the case. And I don't know if you may have seen a stamp. It was Buzz Aldrin was wearing his big space helmet, and it was gold. Had the sun visor down. So and Buzz Aldrin was a Freemason. So yeah, there's lots of Masonic stamps that are to do with astronauts and also scouts. Oddly enough, I have 6 albums of Masonic space-related stamps. So yeah, there are. It's worth mentioning the numbers as well. A few years ago, there was only maybe a few hundred Masonic stamps, and I have a friend he's an ex-mounted policeman in Canada, and he sent me over his spreadsheet. So I just printed it, thought nothing of it. Then the printer ran out of paper. Then I realised there's over 10,000 Masonic stamps when you go through different classifications. So.
That's a good few stamps to collect, anyone, if you want to pick up the hobby again. Stephen Turner comes in, Campbell, and says, although not strictly Philately, there are always thousands of Masonic postcards and commemorative covers, including some issued by the UGLE to commemorate their 275th anniversary. My own province here in Fife and Kinross, we had one issued for our 250th that was signed by Lord Elgin, and you can still pick them up every now and again.
Yeah, I'm interested in that. Yeah, you're right. It's first day covers. That's another thing to collect.
Well done, Brother Cameron. Certainly more history than building Airfix models. But Danny, we'll be expecting a lecture from you in 20 years' time on the history of Masonic Airfix models. Don't you worry. Well done, Brother Cameron. I'll put the information about the Chalmers stamp up on our Facebook. Great lecture. Ian Walk, thanks for such an interesting lecture, especially poignant for me as the last time I heard a Masonic Philately lecture was when I was in the chair in the early 80s, and with a shortage of candidates had organised some lectures. One was on Masonic Philately given by a past master of Lodge Ladywell Tullibody, 1474. Tom Edgar, I have quite a large collection of Masonic stamps, postcards and first aid covers, but thinking of selling them on. Oh, well, we can maybe get you a deal here, Tom, this evening. 15% commission to myself, and I'll give 5% to the lodge. And you can work out what I'll keep for myself there, brethren. It's because I'm feeling very sorry for myself this evening. Thanks for a very informative talk. Will the slides be available to peruse at our leisure? Campbell, will you be able to share that with me, that I can put up on our Facebook pages? Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I do the orations, they always tell us not to share it, but I've no problem with it. So I can send it to you. It's not a particularly large file, I don't think. It's on PowerPoint. So
yeah, okay, perfect.
It doesn't have all the words to go with it.
No, that'll be fine. We can pick that up afterwards by email. Thank you. Brian Lawson, 1bis. Thanks for this very interesting talk. I'm an MPC member and learned a lot tonight. So well done. Excellent. Good evening, everyone. Excellent. So I think that's all the questions. Well, the final comment, we'll leave it on. First class presentation. Many thanks, Brother Campbell. Also great fun listening to Gordon trying to say philately. Another related big word. See, I got philately right at the end there for you, Ian. You see, I knew what it meant and I knew what to try and say, but I'm here to give you some entertainment on a weekly basis. It's a difficult job at times. Brother Campbell.
Can I butt in there for a second? It might be worth, if any of your members want to join the MCP. It's a tenner a year. You get 4 magazines, all Masonic related, obviously.
Yeah.
No, it's only a tenner.
I've got them here. I joined earlier this year, actually, and I got my free set of peace stamps as well. So I will be putting the details up on our Facebook pages for that. So, okay. Campbell, thank you so much for coming along here this evening and being our special 50th lecturer at our Lodge Hope of Karachi Lockdown Lecture Series. Brian, next week we have Brother Ori Lovett, who is a brother from Lodge Montefiore in Glasgow, but as many of you probably know, he actually resides out in Israel, and Ori will come and present to us on the history of the Grand Lodge of Israel and its connections to the Grand Lodge of Scotland. And I'm sure that from some of the images we've seen this evening and some of the tales we heard from Brother Rolf Kyle last week about Freemasonry and the aftermath of the Second World War in Germany, I'm sure Brother Ori's talk will talk about another element of that story. So Brian, at this time, once again, Campbell, thank you so much. Brian, please unmute and give your own personal thank yous.
Thanks so much, Campbell.
You're welcome. Stay safe.
Thank you for that.
Thanks, Campbell. It was excellent.
Yeah, brilliant.
Cheers, Gordon.
Thank
you very much. An excellent night. Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank you,
Campbell.
Thank you, Campbell.
Excellent meeting.
Great evening. See you next time.
I look forward to it. It's a good tradition.
Excellent talk, Campbell.
Excellent presentation. Really enjoyed it.
Brings back memories. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah. No, you're
Thanks
welcome.
very much for that interesting lecture. That was smashing. Thanks very much, Gordon.
Cheers, man.
Well
Take
done,
care,
Campbell.
brother.
First class.
Campbell, thank you for a super and very interesting talk, and Gordon for hosting us all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Campbell. Enjoyed that lecture. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, Campbell. Excellent. I really
Welcome.
enjoyed that.
Okay,
Gordon.
Brian, I'm going to give you 5.
Gordon, go through my stamp collection. See if I have any.
Yeah. You've got 10,000 to find, Dio.
Right.
Thank you, Campbell. Thank you, Gordon. Can't believe it's been 50 meetings so far.
Yeah, unbelievable, David. But, hopefully not
Campbell.
50 more, but if there is, we will continue. And for
Just
them.
keeping your best foot forward, Gordon.
Yeah, so we can do. Thank you. I see you laughing there, Ian. You're lucky I can't lift my leg up onto the desk to show you it on. That'll put you all to sleep. Eh?
Just steer a leg up on her, Gordon.
And 3. And I can see my own right worshipful master lying sitting back in his chair laughing at me as well. So all over a few stamps. Eh? But and 2, Bern. And 1.
Thank you, Gordon. Thank you, Campbell.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Bern.
Good night.